What's up guys, TechLab here. Now in today's video we're going to be catching up with this NVIDIA Geforce GTX 980. This card is around 10 years old now, but can you actually still play modern games on it? Or should you even buy one in 2024? Well, that's what we're going to find out. So the GTX 980 was NVIDIA's flagship all the way back in 2014, and it actually held the flagship position for quite a while. They didn't actually release the NVIDIA Geforce GTX 980 Ti until about a year after this one, which is a little bit unique because nowadays they tend to drop the real flagship cards, the TIs, actually early, and then they kind of follow up with things like this. So it was a different era, a different time, and that's the kind of thing that they did back then. These were actually released during my break from PC gaming, so I've never really had the opportunity to get under the covers of them and see what they can do. But it was recently featured in one of our YouTube's iBuild competition videos where a competitor actually picked this to compete with other people. I thought during that video it would perform much better than it did, but apparently the rest of the system kind of held it back, so I couldn't see the true power of it in 2024. But today we're going to actually fix that because I've been putting this into our benching rig, which is a much bigger system, so we've been able to unlock the full potential of it. Underneath its pretty cool blower cooler, we have a GM204 GPU. It has a base clock speed of 1127 MHz, a game or boost clock speed of 1216 MHz. It has 2048 shaders, and then probably its downfall in today's age is the 4GB of GDDR5 RAM. It does though sit on a 256-bit memory bus, and it has a PCI Gen 3x16 interface, and to be honest it has a much lower TDP than I thought it would do, at only 165 watts. At release this card would have cost you around $549, which actually doesn't sound that much nowadays considering a flagship card will set you back quite a bit more than that, but back then this would have been a very expensive card indeed, so not as many people would have had it. We actually managed to pick this card up for our challenge video 10 years later for around £50, which I didn't think was too bad, to be honest. It's very difficult to get any kind of graphics card for £50 nowadays, particularly one that is still supported by drivers, which this one is, particularly one that will still play modern games, which this one kind of still does, and we'll see that in the benchmarks soon. But it didn't come without issues. When this card arrived, it was actually packaged very badly and all of the clips were broken inside the actual plastic shroud here. So this actual top piece here was kind of flapping around. I had to resolve that by fixing each of the pegs. We just did a little bit of plastic welding on them. And to be honest, it came out like new. It's very solid. There's nothing wrong with this card now. Nothing's falling apart. And then we had some super issues with temperatures when we started gaming. Running some synthetic benchmarks to begin with showed us that there was going to be an issue because it was rising to around 80 degrees just very quickly, and then when it was in a full swing game, so it was actually being used for a extended period of time, this would actually shoot up to around 95-98 degrees, which obviously affected its performance. It actually lowered its clock speeds at that point just to protect itself, and it affected our benchmarks. But that was actually easily resolved as well. All you need to do to actually fix a graphics card like that is overheating, particularly one of this age, is just take the card apart, which is very simple because we'd already fixed the cover as well, and you just change the thermal paste. The thermal paste in this one was rock solid and we could just chip it away with our finger. It actually fell all over the desk here and we knew there was an issue straight away, so we cleaned that up. We applied some new thermal paste and we got the card back working again. Now when the card is gaming for an extended period of time, it will cap out at around 75 to 80 degrees depending on what the card's doing. So that's not too bad. It's an issue resolved, and it's definitely one worth checking out if you are going to buy a second-hand card like this. But after getting this card working so well, how well does it perform against some of the most demanding games today? Well, to find that out, we did some benchmarks, so let's take a look at them. So as you can see from the benchmarks, this card still does exceptionally well in all titles, although the newer the title, the more you will need some extra special tools. And for that, we need to thank AMD, because obviously being a GTX card, it doesn't support things like DLSS or anything like that, but it is supported by AMD's FSR technologies. In the most demanding games on that list, the only way that we could get this card playable or get a playable experience in them games was of course enabling AMD's FSR 3 with frame generation, and the card performed exceptionally well with that. So if you are a gamer with a 980 out there with its very limited 4GB of RAM, you can still get away with playing some of the most modern games, particularly if you use those types of technologies. If it is an older game that you're looking forward to, like things like Black Mesa, which is a modern game, but it is built off of an old engine, you're going to get a fantastic experience off of something like this, particularly for £50, where we were seeing nearly 300 FPS in 1080p. That does mean that you could probably run the game in 2K, 4K, something like that, and you would still get a playable experience out of it. One of the most amazing things about this card, though, in comparison to the AMD equivalents that we've tested recently, is this card actually still works with Alan Wake 2. Even though in Alan Wake 2 you will get the error message as you try to start the game, which literally says the card is not supported and it doesn't have enough VRAM, when you get into game, you get no further errors. It doesn't actually crash like the AMD cards that we've recently tested. It will get you into game, although the experience is not great. But then again, you still have access to some of AMD's tool sets. To get this game playable, we managed to run it in 1080p, lower the preset down to low, and then enable AMD's FSR 2 with a balanced setting. With this kind of configuration, you will see around 36 frames per second on average with a 1% low of 19. That is not the greatest thing, but amazingly the game actually starts and it runs with the limited 4GB of VRAM. Even though the performance isn't great, it does actually seem quite playable, particularly with that kind of performance. So we actually have a card that is 10 years old, that's a decade old, and it is still playing the most modern games. You're not getting the best performance, you're gonna have to do lots of configuration, but it will actually play them. So for just £50, this card could actually be something for somebody to buy if you're on a very tight budget. Make sure though, if you are going out to buy one of these, you do have a power supply that can actually support it. They don't require that much power compared to the 980 Ti and stuff, but you will need to make sure you've got enough pegs. This one does have two 6-pins, so make sure you've got that on your power supply. But apart from that, it is a card that is a great choice, to be honest, for most budget gamers out there who just want to play something old or just want to have a go at something in the new range, and you're okay using things like AMD's FSR and stuff like that. So I am actually quite impressed with this card, although I don't think it is as impressive as its bigger brother, the GTX 980 Ti, and that's purely down to the VRAM that's included. If they'd have included 6GB on this and maybe 8 on the 980 Ti, this would have actually held up a much better, particularly in those newer titles or in those older titles where we want to really ramp up the graphics. Because remember, even if you're playing something like Doom Eternal, which this card can play perfectly fine, you're still very limited on the VRAM on this card. It won't let you boost those settings up purely because it's just locked down in the game. If you try to go over 4GB of VRAM, which is anything above high settings in that game, then you're just going to get warnings and it's not going to let you start it. So I think they kind of missed out here, Nvidia did, particularly on the VRAM. They should have put 6GB on this, they should have put 8GB on the 980 Ti, and then we'd have seen a little bit more life in them as well. But let me know in the comments what you think about the GTX 980. Did you have one back in the day and what did you think about it? Do you still have one now and what kind of games are you playing? I'd really love to see that in the comments, because I just want to test this card again on something, and it'd be really nice to see what kind of experiences you guys are getting out there. This card will stay with us for a bit now in the studio because I will reuse it again on some kind of budget build or something, so you won't want to miss that. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and also hit that little bell notification so you get notifications of when our new videos drop. And I'm sure, as always, I'll catch you guys in the next one.